Ever get this like weird feeling when people talk about AI, it sounds, I don't know, almost kind of religious.
It's true. Some of the promises, the language they use, it's like we're tiptoeing into this strange new faith.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. This whole idea that AI development, all this cutting edge stuff, is actually drawing on some, well, surprisingly old beliefs. You've got a fascinating collection of sources for us to unpack.
It really is remarkable how much these themes overlap, these connections between artificial intelligence and religious thought.
Right. Monks and machines, ancient myths and algorithms, it's wild. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with Sigal Samuel, this journalist who's been covering the ethics of AI. She's noticed something really interesting that some of the biggest names in AI, the pioneers, they're starting to sound a lot like, well, preachers.
It's tempting to brush it off as a coincidence, maybe just a quirk of how we talk about revolutionary technology.
Right, like every generation thinks they're reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. But Samuel, she digs a little deeper and she finds these uncanny parallels, particularly with Christian eschatology.
And just for those of us who haven't cracked open a theology textbook lately, eschatology, that's the study of what?
The end of the world, basically. The apocalypse, judgment day, all that fun stuff.
See, I knew we'd get to the good stuff eventually. So we've got AI folks borrowing from the Book of Revelation. What's the connection?
It's like Silicon Valley is unconsciously cribbing from an ancient script.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, this whole idea of uploading our minds to the cloud, achieving digital immortality.
Right, like that's the new afterlife.
And it's strikingly similar to the concept of an eternal soul in heaven, isn't it? This idea that we can somehow transcend our physical bodies and live on in a digital realm.
Totally. It's like the same yearning, just with a technological twist.
Exactly. And it's not just about immortality. We've got AI being touted as this ultimate decision maker, this perfectly rational being that can solve all our problems, tell us right from wrong.
It's like we're creating our own digital deity.
That's the thing. It really echoes the role of God in a lot of religious traditions, this all-knowing, all-powerful being that we put our faith in.
And just like in those old prophecies, we've got AI either being our salvation or our downfall, the savior or the destroyer of humanity. It's like this constant tension between hope and fear.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Samuel, at first she thought these were just coincidental responses to, our very human anxieties about life, death, the meaning of it all.
Right, like universal fears just dressed up in different clothes.
Precisely. But the more she researched, the more she realized the connection between AI and religion. It runs much deeper than anyone initially thought.
So it's not just a coincidence, there's something more profound going on here.
That's where Robert Gerasi comes in. He's a professor of religious studies. And he argues that this link between technology and religion, it's not new at all. It's been around for centuries.
So much for the idea of science and religion being completely separate.
It's more like they've always been in conversation with each other, even if we haven't always recognized it. Gerasi points all the way back to medieval Christian thinkers to make his point.
Medieval times. Seriously. What were they up to back then that relates to AI?
Well, these thinkers, they believed that technology, it wasn't just about making life easier. It was about restoring humanity to its former glory. That whole made in God's image idea.
Right, like humans were perfect before the Apple incident and all that.
Exactly. So for them, building new technologies, it was almost a spiritual act, a way of reclaiming that lost perfection.
Fascinating. So you're telling me that even back then, technology was tied up with these big philosophical questions about human potential and our place in the cosmos.
Absolutely. And this belief, it actually fueled a lot of technological advancement in the Middle Ages.
Wait, really? I always picture the Middle Ages as this technological dark age.
Well, think again. Monasteries, they were like the Silicon Valley of their day. Monks were developing all sorts of innovative technologies.
Like what? I'm picturing like illuminated manuscripts, maybe some fancy calligraphy.
Well, they had those too.
Yeah.
But we're talking water wheels, intricate clocks, new agricultural techniques. These monks, they were tinkerers, inventors, and they saw their work as a form of worship, a way to bring humanity closer to the divine. So we've got these medieval monks building water wheels in the name of progress, and here we are, centuries later, trying to create artificial intelligence.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, are these impulses really that different?
It's like we're chasing the same dreams, just with fancier tools. But you know what's really got me thinking? Why are we so fixated on creating AGI, artificial general intelligence, even with all these warnings about the risks?
Yeah, it's like we're so eager to unlock this powerful new technology, we're not really stopping to think about the consequences.
Exactly, and that's what I don't get. Like, even some of the brightest minds in tech, people who are building this stuff, they're worried about what it could unleash, but we're still pushing forward full speed ahead. It doesn't make sense. Well, part of it might be that we're not even fully aware of the forces that are driving us. It's like these old religious ideas about technology and transcendence, they've been repackaged for the 21st century.
Okay, I'm listening. Repackaged how?
We need to talk about these movements. Transhumanism, effective altruism, long-termism. It might sound like something out of science fiction, but they're actually shaping the future of AI in some pretty profound ways.
Okay, break it down for me. I gotta be honest. When I hear those words transhumanism, long-termism, I don't exactly picture, like, stained glass windows and incense.
Right, they don't exactly scream religion, but they're rooted in some of the same core ideas. Let's start with transhumanism. Imagine a future where technology allows us to overcome our physical limitations, to merge with machines, to achieve a kind of immortality. That's the essence of transhumanism.
So we're talking cyborgs, uploading our consciousness, living forever in the digital cloud.
Exactly, sounds crazy, right? But the idea itself isn't actually that new. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist back in the 20th century.
Mm.
He actually wrote about this. He believed that evolution, driven by technology, was leading us toward this state of collective superconsciousness. He called it the omega point.
The omega point. Okay, that sounds intense.
Yeah, it's a pretty heady concept. And later on, futurists like Ray Kurzweil, they picked up on this idea. He called it the singularity, the moment when human intelligence and artificial intelligence merge, creating something beyond our current understanding. And the thing is, they truly believe that we can conquer disease, aging, even death itself through technology.
It's like a technological utopia. So are you saying that it's just part of being human, this need to believe in something bigger than ourselves?
Oh, brother,
It's God or the singularity?
it's a fascinating question. And this connects to another movement that's shaping the AI landscape, effective altruism.
Effective altruism, right? Or, as the cool kids call it, EA. I've heard of it, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. It sounds nice enough, though, right? Doing good for others.
On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. The goal is to do the most good for the most people, to maximize your positive impact on the world. But the way some proponents aim to achieve that goal is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do they plan to do the most good?
That's where long-termism comes in. It's a core idea within EA, and it basically argues that we should be prioritizing the long-term survival and well-being of humanity, even if it means making sacrifices in the present.
So instead of, like, donating to a food bank today, you should be investing in some far-off future utopia.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. They're not saying we should ignore present suffering,
Yeah.
but they argue that future generations, they represent the vast majority of potential people. So even small improvements to their lives would have an enormous moral impact, far outweighing any short-term costs.
I mean, I get the logic. You help 1 billion people 1,000 years from now, that's a pretty good return on your investment. But it's hard to wrap your head around, thinking on those timescales.
Exactly. But for long-termists like Will McCaskill, this isn't some abstract philosophical exercise. They see hitting a plateau in technological development as one of the biggest threats facing humanity.
So we need to keep innovating, keep pushing the boundaries, or we risk going extinct.
It's not just about innovating for the sake of it. It's about ensuring our long-term survival. And for them, that means developing AGI, even with the risks.
Because the alternative, stagnation, is even more dangerous.
Precisely. They see AGI as a necessary risk, a potential safeguard against existential threats. They believe it could solve climate change, pandemics, maybe even help us colonize other planets, ensuring humanity's survival beyond Earth.
So AGI, it's both the potential savior and destroyer of humanity. It's like we're trapped in this loop, replaying these ancient anxieties, but on a global scale. It's a bit much, don't you think?
It's a kind of apocalyptic logic, wouldn't you say? This incredible sense of urgency, these incredibly high stakes, it fuels this go-all-in mentality that can be both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel a little, I don't know, maybe existentially overwhelmed. Like all of this is already decided, like we're just along for the ride, headed straight for this AGI future, ready or not.
And that's exactly the danger, isn't it? This kind of technological determinism, this idea that progress is this unstoppable force, and we have no choice but to get on board or get left behind.
It's like we're handing over the steering wheel to, well, I'm not even sure what to call it. Fate, destiny, an algorithm.
And that's what Elk Schwartz finds so concerning. She's a political theorist, and she argues that we've given way too much power to a very small, very select group of AI developers. And most of the time, we're not even having a real conversation about it, let alone a democratic process.
It's like we're letting a handful of people, maybe with their own, messiah complexes, decide the fate of humanity. And they're doing it based on some code they wrote in their basement.
And the thing is, they might not even realize it, but their decisions, they're being shaped by these deeply ingrained religious ideas about progress, about salvation, even about the end of the world.
It's like we're letting these ancient narratives write our future. And that's a terrifying thought.
Exactly. And it brings us to a really critical point. We can't just blindly accept that technological advancement automatically equals moral progress. These things are not the same.
It's like we're so busy worshiping at the altar of technology, we've forgotten to ask ourselves the big questions. What kind of future are we even trying to build here?
And who gets to decide? I mean, we've been talking about all these different motivations driving AI development, right? Some want immortality, others want to solve global problems. Some even talk about creating like countless simulated beings living in these blissful digital worlds.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, except the stakes are, well, the future of humanity.
Right. And each path, each choice comes with its own set of values, its own set of potential consequences. Are we building AI to like transcend our humanity or to actually help us with the messy, complicated reality of being human right now?
To me, it's like choosing between playing God or actually, serving humanity. And those are two very different paths.
And that's exactly what Ilia Delio talks about. She's a Franciscan sister, a theologian, and she acknowledges that we're becoming techno-sapiens. Like it or not, our lives are becoming increasingly intertwined with technology.
Right. It's not like we can just unplug and go live in the woods anymore.
Exactly. But she stresses that it's not enough to just let technology reshape us in its image. We have to define our values, figure out what's important to us before we hand over the reins.
It's like we're building this incredibly powerful tool, this technology that could change everything, but we haven't even bothered to read the instruction manual.
It's time we start paying attention, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's an understatement. So, where do we go from here? We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Ancient myths, futuristic fantasies, religious impulses embedded in algorithms.
It's a lot to process. But for me, the takeaway is clear. We have to be aware of these narratives, these stories we tell ourselves about technology and progress. We have to start questioning them, challenging them.
Because if we don't, we're just letting someone else write our future for us. And who knows what kind of story they'll choose to tell.
Exactly. We have the power to shape this technology, to steer it in a direction that aligns with our values.
We have the power to choose our own adventure, to write our own story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the strange, fascinating, and often unsettling world of AI and religion. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep shaping the future you want to see.